Alright, so today I want to show you the extreme variability of the Calico gene in ball pythons. And typically when I think of Calico, I pretty much think of a gene that brings up some white on the side of the snake. Sometimes it can be kind of a gradient, sometimes it can be like a really high intense white on the side of the snake. And come to find out, not all Calicos are the same. There's quite a few different lines of Calicos, and we kind of group them all together. As a matter of fact, I've actually been working quite a bit with Calico here in my collection, and this is the first year where I actually isolated the gene by itself. And when I actually first produced that Calico, I had no idea what it was. I was like, what in the world did I produce? It almost looked like kind of a cross between maybe a blackhead and an orange dream. It didn't have any white coming up the side. As a matter of fact, I actually went over to Morphmarket and I started searching Calicos, and sure enough, there are some Calicos that look like the snake that I produced. So it is a different version of Calico. It's so extreme, it almost looks like a completely different gene, not even looking like a Calico, which is kind of crazy. So what I want to do today is I want to show you that snake, how kind of wild it is. It's still a hatchling. I just hatched it out maybe about a month ago. It's doing pretty good, ate a few meals. It has some really crazy color. And then I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you how crazy the Calico can be from one example of the gene to another. Alright, so take a look at this guy. Believe it or not, this is actually a Calico. When I first hatched this out, I was like scratching my head thinking, what in the world is that? Because usually when you think of a Calico, when I think of a Calico, I think of the white coming up the sides. If you actually look at the sides on this, and look at how crazy the pattern is on the sides of this. And there's really no white coming up like you would typically expect on a Calico. Usually you have a little bit of white on the bottom, or usually like in the alien heads, like right in the middle of the pattern, a lot of times you'll see some white coming through. And on this one, you couldn't really tell that it was like your typical Calico compared to what I normally would expect. And when I first hatched it out, look at how dark the background is. Super black. I thought it was like some kind of a dark gene. I thought it was like blackhead or something like that. And if you actually look at the blackhead, usually the blackhead has a completely solid blackhead. If you actually look at the head on this one, you can see there's a little bit of a light pattern right in the middle of the head, which you usually don't see with blackhead. So I was kind of going through all these genes trying to figure out what this was, and then I thought maybe it had some orange dream, because if you actually look at the orange right in here, it's like super orange right on the sides. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera. It depends on the color grading that I use. You know, sometimes the colors can be a little off on the camera versus real life, but this is like super orange and really dark. And as a matter of fact, I actually went over to Morphmarket and I found one almost exactly like this, which is kind of crazy that this is just a Calico with no other genes. If it was a blackhead, it'd have a blacker head. If it was an orange dream, usually the orange dream really reduces the pattern. The other thing about the orange dream is you usually have these like almost like het pied markers along the belly, although you kind of see a little bit right here, but I don't think that's orange dream in there. I think this is just another version of the Calico, which is kind of unexpected. As a matter of fact, I actually produced this from my pastel Calico female, and when I first started breeding that one, I thought it had cinnamon in it or something because it was so dark. It's pretty amazing that it was just a dark version of the Calico mixed with a pastel to make that really dark cinnamon looking pastel Calico. It was kind of crazy. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to show you a variety of Calicos from a low expression all the way to a high white, high expression Calico, and a few Calicos where the colors really change from one to the other, and then using those Calicos, mixing them in with other genes to kind of dial in the ideal visual appearance of some of your combinations based on which type of Calico you have, which is kind of interesting. It's almost like being an artist. If you know which Calico you have, you can mix it in with the right genes to really dial in the right visual appearance to make some really stunning snakes. So I actually want to start with this one. Take a look at this. This is kind of unusual. This is a really low expression Calico. It's a low white Calico, and if actually someone handed me this snake, I would probably think, yeah, that is a normal ball python. It has like a normal wild type color and a little bit of a jumbled up pattern, maybe a little bit, but not really outside of the realm of what you typically see in a normal. And kind of the thing that gives it away is you have just a little bit of speckling on the sides right in the white. And sometimes it's hard to actually tell if you actually produce a calico when you're breeding calico. Some of them can be extremely low white. I actually pulled up another one over here. Take a look at this. This definitely, you can definitely tell in this one that it is a calico. You can see a little bit more pixelation, and sometimes you'll actually see in the calicos where it almost looks like, almost just like individual scales have a white color versus kind of a transition. You can see maybe on this one a little bit of transition up the sides in some spots, and then in some spots you can kind of see this bright white pixelation, which is kind of an interesting line of calico. I actually pulled up another one over here. Take a look at this. When I think of calico, this is what I think of. I think of more white coming up the sides. And when I produced calicos this year, I thought for sure that they were actually going to look like this when I separated the gene. And usually the calico can be, you know, really variable. Sometimes it can be a really high white, and I'd say this is probably your average calico as far as what I would typically expect to see. You can actually see some patches that are really super bright white, and then a little bit of pixelation on the side. You can see it's kind of stretching out the patterns a little bit. And kind of the interesting thing on this one is if you actually take a look at the back, sometimes you'll have an empty back that's kind of like a black back with no pattern at all. And on this one you can definitely see it kind of has these spots down the back, so it's not always like an open back on your calicos. It can be kind of tricky. I actually pulled up another one over here. Take a look at this one. This is a really high expression calico, really high white. So if you actually look at the different versions of the calico, especially this really high white one, what I would actually do with this is I would cross this with a spider, and the spider has kind of a pseudo calico look with the white coming up the sides of the spider. And if you actually mix that with something like this that is a really high expression calico, you get some really amazing combinations. Essentially what you get is you get a snake that is like really high white with just this really thin spider pattern right on the top. That's probably some of my favorite spider combinations, working them in with a really high white calico. You can make some stunning results. So take a look at this. This is another version of calico. Sometimes you get the really high white spots and a lot of pixelation, and in some versions of calico you actually get more of a gradient that kind of breaks about halfway through the snake. I've actually seen a lot of combinations listed as calico, and I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't look like calico to me. And the kind of the key indicator in some lines of calico is you'll actually see this break right down the middle with a darker color on the top and a lighter color on the bottom, especially in combinations. And a lot of times you actually can't see the white coming up or the pixelation, and the thing that gives it away is kind of the line right down the middle of the side. So take a look at this one. This is another version of calico where instead of just bringing up a really high white, which is pretty amazing in this one, it also brings out a lot of yellow in some calico, just the single gene calico with no other genes in the mix. It's pretty amazing. And you can definitely see in this one how black the background is, super black. And sometimes you'll produce something like this and you'll be scratching your head trying to think, what in the world did I just produce? And come to find out, it's just another version of calico. So here's another one. This is kind of a little bit closer to what I produce. This has a lot of the oranges in it, which is kind of interesting. You can get all the way from a really orange colored calico all the way to a bright yellow calico. And some of them, if you actually look at the background in this, it's not really as dark like a jet ink black background as you'd see on a lot of calicos. And I've noticed with some calicos, you get almost like a sandblast appearance in certain spots. You can see it a little bit here, especially when you mix it in with other combinations. Sometimes it can look almost like someone sandblasted the pattern off, kind of fades out in certain areas, which is kind of a cool effect. So I thought this one was kind of interesting too. Here's another calico. It looks like a really super dark normal. This one has the black back, pretty much an open back. And you can see on this one, it has this little bit of pixelation right on the side. It's pretty unbelievable how the calico can vary from one to the other. You can definitely tell this one is kind of an interesting looking calico. And it really depends on what you're going for as far as the visual appearance. As a matter of fact, the calico, some people consider this to be the same as the sugar. And I actually kind of compared the Calicos and the Sugar, and I'm convinced it's actually the same gene. I actually pulled up a Sugar over here. Take a look at this. This is, it's kind of interesting. We have different names for pretty much the same gene. I think this is, I would say this is probably like the Coral Glow and the Banana, so close that I would consider them to be the same, although some people might argue that the Sugar is completely different than the Calico. But this looks pretty much like a Calico to me with the high white coming up. I actually pulled up another one over here. Take a look at this. This is another Sugar. I actually looked all through all the Calicos and all the Sugars, and the one that I could find that was closest to what I actually produced was this one right here with a really dark background. It was pretty much ink jet black with an open back and kind of an orange color on the snake and kind of these wiped out patterns. It's pretty amazing. I was kind of scratching my head trying to figure out what in the world did I actually produce, and then I ran across this and I was like, yep, I actually produced a different line of Calico, kind of the orange that doesn't have really any white coming up the side, which is, it's kind of crazy. It almost looks like a completely different gene. It doesn't really even look like a Calico. So take a look at this. You can actually work other genes into the Calico. Depending on what line of Calico, you can get really visually different effects. So believe it or not, this is actually the brightest version of the pastel Calico that I could find pretty much over here on Morphmarket. And look at how bright this is. And what I think this is, the pastel can be really variable. So I think this is the really bright line of pastel combined with the really bright yellow line of Calico coming together to form a really bright yellow snake. And I actually pulled up another version of the same exact gene, a pastel Calico, and take a look at this. This is kind of amazing. This is actually another version of the Calico pastel. I actually produced some Calico pastels in my collection, and they look almost like this except with a darker background, really super jet black with kind of this yellowish color, and it's kind of this open like a peach color as far as the pattern. It's completely different, I think, depending on which line of Calico that you have, which is kind of interesting. So I always thought, you know, if you know exactly which line you have, you can kind of dial in what you want to do to make the best visual appearance. And what I'm thinking is I'm actually going to probably take one of my Calicos and breed it to a blackhead. So you're actually taking the blackhead, which is the darkest of the dark of all morphs. It's a really super dark. As a matter of fact, here's a picture of the blackhead right here. And it's a standalone gene. It looks like a really super dark normal with like an ink jet black brown, and a lot of times it'll have a really black head. I think that's where it gets its name, the black head. And if you actually mix in my version of the Calico, which is kind of the dark orange color Calico without the white coming up the side, this is what I think you would get. I actually found this combination over here. Take a look at this. This is a blackhead Calico, and look at what I think, what I would actually produce mixing my dark version of the Calico in with the blackhead. You get a really super black snake that has pretty much no white coming up the side that you would expect from your traditional Calico, but you get a lot of the orange color and the streaking on the sides from the Calico. Pretty awesome combination. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Solar asks, can you breed a red-tailed boa with a ball python? And that is a very good question. I've actually seen some people making some crazy hybrid snakes between ball pythons and snakes of other species, but I have not seen anyone take a red-tailed boa and breed it to a ball python, although it'd be an interesting experiment to see if you can actually have the world's first hybrid between a boa and a ball python. Maybe someone's done it before, but I've just never seen it. I've actually seen just recently, someone made a cross between a ball python and a Burmese python. That is a crazy cross because Burmese can actually get to about 15 feet or longer, which is kind of crazy. Could you imagine like a 15-foot ball python? That would be crazy. I've actually, at one point, I actually had an Australian Woma python in my collection, and I've actually seen some people breeding the Australian Womas with the ball python to get a hybrid, although I kind of talked myself out of it because a lot of people frown on hybrids. Sometimes it can be a little complicated as far as diluting the genetics, especially if you bred that to something something else, although a lot of your hybrids are actually sterile. But one of the things that kind of was in the back of my mind when I was thinking of that project, I was thinking, what if I took a gene like the bamboo, like this snake around my neck? This is Bobby, my bamboo ball python, kind of hiding in the back here. And if you actually took this bamboo and you bred it into something like a Burmese, would you actually get a 15-foot long bamboo hybrid, which would be kind of interesting to see if you could work other genes into the hybrid. It could be a big hit if you actually had the right combination and got something that wasn't sterile and where you can actually reproduce it. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.